There is a story that plagues every single show you will watch. It doesn't matter where you turn. It doesn't matter what you watch. You will always see this story.
So very much hate this plot. It tends to be annoying, tedious, poorly written, and what most Spongebob fans would consider a torture porn. I've touched on it a bit in previous reviews, but it's about time I cover the full plot of House Guest Stories. Now, this isn't a compare and contrast, nor is my normal style of review, but I run into this story so often, it just piles up in my queue, and I don't want to have a billion videos on just this one subject, so I'm just going to try to cover a whole array of shows with this plot. Here we'll be talking about SpongeBob SquarePants, The Buzz on Maggie, Fosters, and many more in this review. From the good to the bad, all in this one video. We're even going to touch on Steven Universe, just to give you an idea of how much I hate this plot. I could have made a countdown on this plot to talk about the worst ones I have, but I have so many on my plate, and in fact I'm probably not even going to scratch the surface of this plot either, but I'll do my best to explain my problem with this very plot. Now, we first have to understand what I mean by a house guest story. Now, normally a house guest story goes on as such. A person who's down on their luck needs a place to stay. So our main characters of the episode decide to let that person stay in their house, and being a good host decides to take care of the guest by giving them the food and doing most of the work for them. During this time, the guest will get used to being catered to and lays around the house asking for every little thing to be done for them, driving the host crazy until either the host gets revenge or kicks the guest out on the street. Now, this doesn't sound like a bad plot as it has the basics of story writing. A beginning, where the person comes to the house. A conflict, the guest driving the host crazy. And a solution where they get their just desserts or get thrown out into the gigantic fuck you and have a nice day. But my issue with this plot comes in the form of the cliches that are required for the story to happen. Most of the time, you need to have the guest as your most annoying character on the show. The worst example of this is Angelica Breaks a Leg, in which Angelica is the house guest who only wants attention. Of course, the Pickles don't have time to give Angelica any attention because she wants to go to the zoo and they're too busy to go. Drew has work on being a toy designer and Dee Dee has to do most of the housework. Angelica on Rugrats has always been a nuisance, and the fact that she's the focus of the episode makes this episode all the more agonizing to watch, especially taking into consideration the two are close to having a mental breakdown by the end of the episode. However, not all examples of the house guest has annoying characters as their main focus. What about Steven Universe? Greg is a house guest in the episode named House Guest. So what about him? Well, that's true. While Greg is not an awful character by any sense of the word, House Guest still has quite a few glaring flaws in the episode, such as the cliché seen in most house guest stories, the call bell. The call bell will get pretty annoying as it detracts from any plot point B. In the example of house guest, a big plot in the episode is a contained storm that could destroy the gyms. And it's cracked, leaving a good sense of adventure and a good setup for character development, as Steven is kind of learning his healing powers around this time. However, Greg decides he wants more attention from Steven than the important gym business that could have taught Steven a lesson, which really detracts from the severity of the situation. Argue that Greg was the main focus of the episode all you want. It doesn't change the fact that they had a setup to this big deal, only to have it distract itself by Greg's call bell every 5 seconds. Now, sometimes the episode will not have a call bell. Just to give an example out there, and I can't believe I'm bringing this show up again, Sonic Boom's Can an Evil Genius Crash on Your Couch for a Few Days? I mean, Eggman can be an alright character. When I last reviewed Sonic Boom, I said it was stupid, yet harmless. And hell, this episode was part of that review. And while Eggman could have been considered the annoying character, let's give it the benefit of the doubt, because it was all according to plan. Well, another cliche that is brought up that really does irk me with this story is the main characters must deal with it. See, a really good story that's based on comedy is usually a story that's built on misunderstanding. Look at Cuckoo for Cocoa Cards, an entire episode that was built on Blue not understanding Coco's feelings towards his selfishness. And while during the episode could have been a bit grating, it has a sweet payoff in the end where Blue says his apologies and resolves the issues. Unfortunately, the majority of the times through house guest stories, there is no misunderstanding. The person staying at home knows damn well they're faking it in order to trick the protagonist into letting them inside. Now, I say majority as there is an example of a house guest story that is built on misunderstanding, and understandably enough, is one of the more popular Spongebob Squarepants episodes. Brother, can you spare a dime? Now, how many of you would be angry at me if I said I still didn't like this episode either? But Doodle, I hear you say, there's no call bell, Squidward's not usually annoying, and SpongeBob doesn't deal with this shit the whole time. What's your issue? Well, you're right on all three accounts. It certainly is the least bad when it comes to the glaring cliches of the house guest story, but it's still built on one thing that can almost never be removed from the equation, the trope of which I call the picky, which doesn't just plague house guest stories. It can be in any story. It's just prevalent in house guest stories. Without the picky, you almost cannot have a house guest story, and that's where the point of conflict comes from. Steven Universe, Foster's, and hell, even Horrid Henry managed to avoid the picky, but still fell under some rotten cliches that make the house guest story so grating. No. The picky is when you get someone up at 3 in the morning to make chocolate pudding just to say you aren't hungry. The picky is when you sit down for a solid who knows how long asking someone to adjust your footrest. The picky is when you want, well, what he wants. Yeah, I can't play audio here. I've heard horror stories about Hasbro's copyright, and I don't want that on my head again. I'm sure someone out there on YouTube has posted the whole song and got away with it somehow, but I'm not gonna be that lucky. Anyway, the picky makes the story drag out and become incredibly tedious to watch, as the demands continue to pile up on the people taking care of these fakers in need. Open the window, close the window, make a sandwich, move these bricks, I wanted egg whites, break reality for me. I know these are cartoons, and they aren't supposed to be realistic, but instead be over the top and crazy. But the issue is, they don't just cut to the chase and go over the top and crazy. If they did, I'd feel like it was a spoof of the house guest story. And as long as they didn't overdo it, it'd be fine. Hell, not going over the top and giving simple requests can also be fine, as long as you don't overdo it. That goes with a lot of things I review on this channel. Does it take something and overdo it? If the answer is yes, more often than not, they'll be here on Crappy Cartoons with these 10 episodes. If not, they can either be a meh-episode or an animated angel. Okay, to wrap this up, if you like these stories, more power to you. You have a longer fuse than I do. For me, I just see disaster after disaster, whether it be Angry Beavers faking it, or Buzz on Maggie's training day. Or even an episode that's as beloved as House Guest or Brother Can You Spare a Dime. I just can't get into these kind of episodes. The formulaic repetition just gets on my nerves, as I know how these episodes tend to end. It's mostly the same song and dance every time, but with maybe 1 or 2 dance steps changed. And speaking of formulaic repetition,
What could possibly go wrong?
you're next.
From the bees, whenever you can brew it.
I'll get your tea.
And while I get a
If you would like to get caught up on future reviews, there's a link in the description below to a Facebook page. Basically, all that I'm gonna tell you. I mean, you can follow it, you can get all the updates to future reviews if you care. If not, I'm not gonna force you to do it. It's all up to you.